My name is Zaid Uddin Haider, and I am a user interface and user experience designer in GeekyAnts. And today's topic is understanding empathy in design thinking. So, first, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I come from a design background, but initially I was more interested in industrial design and product design. But after a certain point, I met a jury in my college time only. There was something she said, there is nothing more tangible now than code or the applications that we use in day-to-day life. So at that time, my focus a little bit shifted towards UI and UX. Then I started doing my own research, and now here I am. So let's talk about design thinking first. So design thinking is a term that many of you may have heard, like it is very popular between designers, and a lot of organizations and companies are also now exploring what design thinking is. So basically, design thinking is a problem solving methodology focusing on human-centric design solutions. So what this mean is when solving a problem, designers always and utilizing design thinking, designers always keep users at the center of the problem while doing research, while doing ideations and brainstorming about the solutions. Users of that particular product or service are always at the center. And I also think like design thinking resembles a lot with the chemical reaction. I say this because in a chemical reaction, what happens is basically the quantity or the proportion of uh, the chemical that are going to react will determine the end result, like what will be the quality of the end reaction. And in design thinking, what happens is the time that you spent on each of these phases will determine the quality of the result. So sometimes what happens is there may be clients or stakeholders that come in with time constraints. Like they have to get the product or an app or a website delivered in a certain time. So if a designer is spending a lot of time in doing research or a lot of time in doing ideations, so that won't be good for the client. So now let's talk about the five phases that are inside design thinking. So design thinking is not a linear process. So every designer can have his or her own design process, but commonly this is the way that designers uses. The first phase is called empathize phase. So the empathize phase is also known as research phase. So what happens is empathize phase is a designer tries to understand the user's need, why a user or why a client need this certain feature or need this certain product in this way only. Then comes after the whole research is done, then comes the define stage. In define stage, what happens is a problem statement or a design brief is being defined. So and a problem statement is defined keeping in mind what are the obstacles, what are the goals, and who are the audience for which the solution is being developed. Then if a problem statement is done correctly, it also helps in the next stage, that is the ideation stage, where the designers brainstorm and come up with a lot of solutions or ideas that can be a solution of the problem that initially we had. So one thing that is said about ideation phase is that a designer or a problem solver should not restrict their mind while thinking about solutions. I say this because sometimes what happens is uh, an idea comes to our mind and we think that it may not be feasible enough, or it may be stupid. It may sound stupid. So we should not think about these things while ideation phase. We should write down the idea, whatever idea comes into our mind, or we should speak it out loud. What happens in ideation phase is like if we write down all the ideas, if it is not feasible enough also, so it can be again be evolved, or it can be merged with some other idea. So that is why this is the ideation stage. Then comes the prototypes phase. What happens is prototype phase is that in prototype phase, whatever ideations were done, some of those ideations get into prototype phase. So a high fidelity prototype or a low fidelity prototype of those ideations are being developed now. And once those prototype are made, a few of them are disqualified because of not of their when these prototypes are being developed. So while developing the prototypes, the designers and the problem solvers are able to understand like why this particular prototype won't work. So those prototypes are disqualified, and in the end comes the testing phase. So the prototypes that are not disqualified goes into the testing phase, and in testing phase what happens is basically the prototypes that were developed were given into the real audience hand, the user's hand, to get their feedback, to see how they behave and how they use the product or service that has been developed. And they and the feedbacks are also being collected, and those feedbacks are used to improve the product or service again. So basically, this is the idea. This is the idea of design thinking, and this is how the design thinking works. Then, what is empathy? So, empathy basically is the first phase that we are going to talk about. So, empathy is an individual's ability to see a scenario or a problem through other people's eyes. Like if I am facing a problem, a designer would be able to see like what problem and how am I behaving around a certain product or a certain scenario. And one other thing that is crucial in empathy is a designer should never have assumptions regarding any problem or any solution, because assumptions are not good for designers. Assumption cause constraints while designing. So we should always start with a beginner's mindset to look into a problem. So then there is a common misconception like empathy versus sympathy. Like the so empathy and sympathy are two very different natural emotions that we have. So what happens is sympathy often has a feeling of judgment or pity involved. So and empathy never has a feeling of judgment and pity involved. In empathy, what a designer or problem solver does is they observe their audience without any judgment to see how they are behaving or what problem they are facing. So let's take an example like if a prosthetic leg has to be designed for a certain specially able individual. So if we are sympathizing with that user, we won't be able to design. We won't be able to understand what are the problems and what are the needs and how are we going to design a prosthetic leg for a specially able person. But empathizing will help us to see and observe and know what are the problems and what has to be done to come up with a good prosthetic leg for that particular individual. Now let's talk about why empathy is needed. So the first point is empathetic design caters to real users' need rather than averages. So sometimes what happens is a product or service has different user groups. So those different user groups can be demographics. Those different user groups can be different age groups. So an empathetic design is never going to just cater the problem of one particular user group. It always caters and empathizes with the needs and wants of all the user groups that a product has. Then comes the second point. The second point is the main objective of the empathy is to identify user needs and behaviors that are latent and unarticulated. So by latent and unarticulated means is sometimes there are clients that come in and ask for and give vague briefs. They sometimes they don't even understand what they need or why they want a certain thing in a certain way. So as a designer or a problem solver, it is our responsibility to figure out why they want this particular feature or this particular maybe illustration or maybe this particular kind of layout. So we have to understand that by and we can understand this by doing competitive analysis and by understanding our users, or we can do this also do this by interviewing our client and stakeholder, so we can understand their latent and unarticulated needs. Then comes the third point. The empathy helps designer to start with beginner's mindset and set aside their own assumptions. So what happens is as we grow, we experience different things, and those experience get into our way while solving a problem. So like past experiences uh, work as constraint while solving a new problem. So those past experience and those assumptions we have to set aside while brainstorming on a new problem or while designing a new product. Then let's take few examples to see how empathy works and why empathy is needed. So let's take the example of airport departure board. So let's say sometimes what happens is catching flights can be very stressful experience, because you may be getting late, or maybe your luggage is heavy weight, so you are worried about getting an extra charge for that extra weight. So and you get into the check-in line, and now you have, let's say, checked in. Now you arrive to see, now you want to know the status of your flight. So you look at the image one departure board, and you see this small board, and this small board will keep changing the screen to show all the statuses of other flights. So you will feel stressed because you are not able to easily find and locate the status of your flight. And this the image one also has Mandarin language written over it, and Mandarin is not a universal language. So what happens is you will not be easily able to recognize or understand which is your flight. So while designing this image one departure board, the designer didn't uh, have the psychological and emotional state of the users. The designer didn't think about these things. While on the other hand, we have on image 2, we have a proper big departure board where flights are properly categorized region wise and departure and arrival wise. So it will be a less stressful experience to locate your flight on this departure board. Then the second example comes from Apple. So Apple Magic Mouse 2. So what Apple did was Apple tried to solve one problem, and that problem was to make a wireless mouse. So they did come up with a wireless mouse, but they put the charging port on the back surface of the mouse. So they did come up with a solution for a problem, but now they designed another problem here. So they didn't take into account that user will want to use this mouse while charging also. So if they have put the charging port on the back side or the front side of the mouse, so user will easily be able to use this mouse while charging also. Then the next example is Google Glass. So Google Glass was launched around 2012, and Google hyped this product a lot. So and they also had a pre-sale for this product, and like people bought this product for around $1,500. So people did like this product before the launch. They bought it a lot, and a lot of celebrities bought this product. But when they bought it and they started using it in regular life, so they they were able to figure out that this product didn't have any use in normal social interaction. So because like this product was very good from the perspective of technology. Like this product has a camera and video recording and GPS, and show you message alert and call other people. But in a social interaction, why would a person want to use, in a normal social interaction, why would a person want to use something like Google Glass? And other point was people also felt that their security is being breached if another person is wearing a Google Glass in front of them, because they didn't want any other person to take their photograph and their videos without their consent. So Google didn't think about how this product would uh, behave in in a normal social interaction in the live environment. So this product miserably failed after a year only. Then let's see some of the ways like how designers empathize. So the first process is some of designers use ethnography. So basically, ethnography simply means observing your user and audience in real life environment. So basically, the real life environment means where a task is a product or service is naturally being used. So by doing ethnography, the designers are able to see how a product is being used and what are the problems. The designers can observe what are the problems that a person is facing in completing a certain task or goal while using that product or service. So many of you may know this person in the GIF. So this is the best ethnographer I've seen till date. Then comes the second method. The second method is empathy mapping. So empathy mapping is basically a visual representation of what user like how user behaves and what user says. So empathy map looks something like this. Empathy map has four quadrants. So those four quadrants are like what user says, what user thinks, what user does, and what user feels. So basically, an empathy map is made by interviewing users through open-ended questions. So this is an example where I had to come up with a design campaign idea for the users for an audience that was around 36 to 48 age group, like how they to work on their fitness. So what they are feeling in like how they are working on their fitness and what are the motivations that they require to work more on their fitness. So when an empathy map is made, the pain points and opportunities can also be determined, like what are the problems that user are facing in completing a certain task or goal. And when the pain points are determined, then opportunities can also be determined, like these particular things can be done to improve or to solve this problem. So this is empathy map. Then comes the third method, that is user stories. So user stories are basically short stories that describe something that the user wants to accomplish by using a product as and service. So this is a template, how a user story is. Like as a type of user, I want to perform some task so that I can achieve some goal. So here the motivation, the action, and the motivation of the user is captured through user stories. So this user stories came from a software development methodology, that is agile and scrum software development. So here is a picture, like why do we need user story. So basically in the first frame, this gentleman is saying I can't give you all these features in first version, and all of these features need to have what we call a user story. But then there are some clients that may reply as, okay, here is a user story, you give me all of my features or I will ruin your life. So there are clients that come up to us and say, like, we want all of these features without even researching and without even knowing why these features are needed. So we will land on like a scenario like Google Glass or maybe Magic Mouse. That's why user stories are necessary. Then this is also a case where that shows how user stories work and why they are necessary. So in frame one, we are seeing that in frame one it is written as how the customer explained it. So this was the customer brief. Then in second frame it is written how the project leader understood it. So it is a totally different thing that a project leader understood. Then the how the designer uh, how the analyst designed it. So it is very different from the previous frame. Then how the programmer wrote it, then how business consultant described it, and then how the project was documented, then what operations installed, then how the customer was built. So basically what here is being shown is that inside a company there is a hierarchy. So that is being followed in a product development. So but if there are no user stories, the brief that was given to the first person can change by going down into the hierarchy. So if that is done, then we are like kind of wasting our time and wasting our money. So that there is so this is also the case where empathy comes in. So if you have the proper user story, the motivation and the uh, need that why user wants this particular feature, the designer or the developer won't deviate from that, and they will have a lot of time to work on certain feature or certain uh, input or insight. So this is why user stories and empathies are needed. Then we are towards the end of the presentation. So The takeaway is to effectively address your customer need, you should be able to understand their problem holistically after intense research. And intense research is always required to understand what your user need and why your user needs that particular feature or that particular solution. And then the second point is assumptions lead designers to solution that makes their audience's life miserable. So we can go back to the example of Google Glass and Magic Mouse. So their assumptions led their designs to a very miserable concept and making their lives very miserable. Thank you so much.